This is Two Guys Talking About with Kevin Kolbe and Bill Jordan.
Welcome to a new episode of Two Guys Talking About. And I'm Kevin.
And I'm Bill.
And this is just our weekly video podcast show where we talk about different things every week.
Yeah.
And a lot of different ways that you can consume it. So wherever you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube or our website or even as a podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of people doing that, including the one person in Australia that's downloaded the podcast.
Good day.
Good day, mate. Thank you very much. That was more like...
I hope they're still listening.
Yeah, they're going, delete.
They're doing the fake
Delete.
Australian accent.
Oh, my word. Anyway, but we really appreciate you being here. And today, we're talking about Father's Day.
Yep.
And I've got this right, because I'm not good with dates. Father's Day is Sunday.
Correct. Father's Day is always on a Sunday, Kevin.
Is it?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Because if you've been following this, I messed up Memorial Day, and I messed up, I think, Mother's Day. I think any special day we've had, I've been able to mess up.
I like that if you're just joining us and think that we're flawless, that Kevin has filled you in that we are not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
always good to bring people up to speed on your faults.
Yes, yeah.
If you missed it, I messed this up and this up and this up.
It's just like,
See,
well...
we've been married too long.
Yeah.
We're accustomed to doing this. We are always messing something up.
But didn't you get that, though, when you were on radio? You could have, like, a fantastic show, and then you say one thing wrong, and they're like,
It's always quick. People are very quick to point out a mistake.
Sit up. There you go. But we are talking about Father's Day and dads and things like that.
You bring up a good point when you added that to it, because to me, while it is Father's Day, and that's a great thing,
mm-hmm.
I like to think of it as Dad's Day, and just like I like to think of it as Mom's Day, because I think, especially in the dad world, most any guy can be a father.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes a special guy to be a dad.
That's a good point.
And so I think of it as Dad's Day. And I hope I'm a
Yeah.
dad and not just a father.
So, and you've got one daughter.
Yep.
And I have 3 kids, boy, girl, boy, in that order. Very blessed, way more blessed than I deserve. Now, how was your relationship with your dad?
It became it was never strained or bad, but it became better as he became a grandfather and got older.
Isn't that interesting?
And then we became, we'd go out and play golf. And we did stuff when I was a kid. He'd take us fishing.
Yeah.
We had a boat and that was all cool. But he was in his job, which toward the end of his career, it was driving him crazy and giving him ulcers. And
what did he do? What was his
He
career?
worked at the Newport News shipyard up in
he really?
Virginia. Yeah, he worked there for 35 years, took a little time off for a thing called WW2. And then came back but took an early retirement because literally, it was making him sick. Wasn't happy. So, but after that, he definitely mellowed,
Right.
And I great memories of my dad.
It's funny we're not, we don't know what relationship you have with your dad. Hopefully it's great. And if it's not good, hopefully you've got time to kind of patch that up too. But, it's interesting as we age, how the relationship changes, how we see our dads. And I think moms too, but I think it's different with dads. Don't you?
Well, I think, yeah. One, especially if your mom carried you. I can't understand that bond. I wish I did understand that bond of carrying your child. It's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. The thing though that I always think about with Mother's Day and Father's Day is, and then when our daughter had her, we've got 2 grandchildren. Our kids never know how we feel about them until they have their own.
That's true.
So we don't really think about, you're growing up, oh yeah, mom and dad loves me. We don't really know their thoughts and stuff until we have our own. And then it's kind of like, oh, they were worried about me doing this too, maybe. Maybe, they were, when I learned to drive and was out on my own, they had these same thoughts that maybe I'm having.
And my mom still reminds me of that every time. Every time we talk,
Yeah. Well, my mom would always say, I don't care if you live to be 100 years old, you're still going to be my baby. And that is true.
Yeah.
You
Now, we were talking about, or you started talking about your dad was in World War II. You've got something.
A little show and tell. This is
actually
my
really cool.
This is my dad's shirt, Army shirt that he wore when he came home from the European theater. He was in the 4th Armored Division. His sleeve is still pressed. He was in the 4th Armored Division. That is a 9th Armored Division patch because he had to transfer to the 9th Armored Division to come home. But he came home in October of 1945 after the war. He was a 15 and a half 32. There's no way I could fit into this shirt today.
And so what you didn't see as we were starting the show is that Bill brought it out and he was showing it to me. And then he goes to lay it on the floor and it's almost like, I don't want to lay it on the floor.
Yeah, it felt weird.
And I didn't bring it, but I actually have. So my dad was in the Army and the Navy. He got in the Army, and I think he did 2 years in the Army. He was in, I think, around the Korean War, sometime around there. And he got out, and I think it was a year later, and they were going to reinstate him, and he joined the Navy. And the thing about joining the Navy, he had joined for 4 years. So he actually served, I think, 6 years total. But he didn't have to go through the same basic training and stuff. And so somewhere, I actually may have given it to my daughter now I think about it, is I have my dad's sailor uniform. And I even had his hat for a while, too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's
great. It's those memories. But he actually shared a story. Now, this is crazy. This was back around Korean War, where he was on a destroyer escort. And he was talking about what's funny is, though, they would have to transport Marines and other guys, and he said within 24 hours they'd be throwing up on everything. Anything that had a hole in it, they'd be throwing up, and then the frogmen would come on. And it was like there was this awe.
Right.
But he was, and that's where he got into electronics and stuff. For most of, actually, I guess maybe all of his career, he worked for a company, doesn't exist anymore, called Western Electric.
I've heard of them.
That eventually was bought by, I think, Bell South or something like that. And he was always into kind of an electrical engineer and things like that, just wired in ways I wasn't at all.
My dad was that way, too. I mean, I've got some traits of his, but he could fix anything.
Like, what's some of the things that you like learned from your dad?
Things I learned from my dad? Oh, gosh. Probably stuff that I'm not even conscious of. To say, work hard. I learned that from my dad.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that. He led by example. He didn't preach at us too much or sit us down and give us advice necessarily, but he definitely led by example. I was thinking about the stuff that he said that I still recall and we still, laugh about and all this stuff. Some of my examples. In fact, something came up about work. I would complain about something about at work and somebody not pulling their weight or something like that. And he said to me, never confuse the amount of time spent at work with the amount of work done. I've always remembered that. I've always remembered that. Another one, I told him that I was going to be paired on the radio for the first time. I was going to have not one, but two female partners. And he says, well, boy. And I said, here it comes. He's going to tell me I'm going to need to be a referee. I'm going to need to be patient. You know what he told me? Keep them away from the thermostat. Keep them away from the thermostat. And he was right. He was right. I worked with a female partner who would set the thermostat on her way out the door.
Yeah, I don't get that. Yeah,
you're always messing with the thermostat.
Leave it alone.
Yeah, you have to put it in this like little glass box with a lock on it. I never touched a thermostat. Something else I give my dad, being a combat veteran of World War II, and he never said this in a mean way, but it was always he told me to go get him a screwdriver or something, right? So I'd go get a screwdriver. No, not that kind. Give me the Phillips head. And I'd bring it back to him. And he would always say something like, good thing this wasn't a combat situation. So I still say that to my family. And if something came up that he didn't approve of or thought was a bunch of, baloney, he's like, balls. He would just say balls.
That's funny.
And something else he would always say that I do remember is everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Everything is going to be all right. And, you know, Kevin and I have talked about in our very first podcast that we are both believers. We're both Christians. And we all know that WWJD, what would Jesus do? But I also said at my dad's memorial service, if I lived my life with what would Dad do, I'd be headed in the right direction more often than not. You know?
You know, it's funny the things that we learn, I think, from our dads. Like my dad was big on being on time. In fact, not even just on time, but early. I mean, if we had to be somewhere like at noon, we'd probably be there about 11:30. He could not stand to be late. Now, unfortunately, that hasn't rubbed off on me. But the other thing I remember, though, is, and this for I only think my parents have had a credit card for only a few years, is they would pay cash. And I wonder if this is part of a generation that grew up not having much. I mean, he had, I think, was it 4 brothers and 2 sisters. He was the first, so there were 2 sisters and then my dad. So he was the oldest boy. And so then when my grandparents were getting older and stuff like that, he would take the lead in that, even though he didn't live the closest. But I remember, though, that we had to have a refrigerator once growing up. And they saved up the money until they could pay cash. And I think paid cash for their car and stuff like that. And it's not like they're rolling in money. They're not. But I think it was just about, if we need something, we'll buy it.
Yep.
And we'll save the money, and we're not going to be strapped to credit. And, you know, it's still a lesson that floats in there. I can't say I pay cash for a lot of things in there, but about this, how much do you need? Do I really need it? Can I save for it? Now, I'm not batting 100 on that.
Right.
But I think those are things that we carry on.
My dad told me that when he took that early retirement from the shipyard. You can live on a whole lot less than you think you can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we were never, what's the word, opulent or anything like that. I mean, he didn't make, back in the day, I think that most he ever told me he ever made was $15,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
I mean, think about that. But again, this was, 50s and 60s and 70s. So, but talking about the cash, something else my advice he gave me that I've always remembered this. He said, if you're getting ready to go on vacation, make a pile of the clothes you want to take and a pile of the money you want to take. Take away half the clothes and double the money pile, and you should be about right. And he was right.
That is true.
It's life lessons. My dad was not a great, book smart guy. We think he was in his 20s when he got out of high school. But life smart.
Oh.
That and cool. State capitals. You could never get him on state capitals.
Really?
He always knew his state capitals.
So the funny thing about my dad is that he thinks he can fix anything, and he typically can. I mean, one of my fond memories growing up is we would be working on the car together. Now, in reality, I just kind of hung out. But it reminds me, though, there's a guy named McDonald. It's not Norm. I forgot his first name. I saw him at a conference years ago, and he said how kids spell love is Time.
Yeah.
And that's always stuck with me about spending that time. And so my dad would go out and, he actually, you know what? He had a 1966 Plymouth Fury 3. It wasn't his first car. And this is also when they built cars to last, like, forever. And I think when he finally got rid of the car, it had, like, 280,000 miles on it, 300,000. The only thing it ever had done on it was the transmission replaced. And I think he didn't do it himself. But I remember laying under the car, changing the exhaust system, just to be with Dad. But now again, I didn't pick up a lot of that mechanical knowledge.
Right. I didn't either. My dad could fix anything.
Oh, but now the flip side to that is, because he doesn't want to spend the money and stuff like that, their dishwasher stayed broken for 2 years. So what they do, they'd wash the dishes and they'd pull the rack out and they use it as a drying rack. And I'm like, Dad, just get somebody to look at it. Oh, I can fix it. No, I can fix it.
Yeah.
And I think my mom finally just broke down and said, I'm calling somebody. And it ended up being like a $20 part.
I remember vividly my dad teaching me how to change a tire. And I feel bad. I never taught my daughter. It was one of those ones, I'm going to teach my daughter to change a tire. She's going to be self-reliant, right? And didn't teach her. I still could teach her, I guess. But he taught me to on my mom's car, the left rear tire, I remember this. It was in the street, right? It wasn't at the curb. It was, so I'm in the street on this curve. We're teaching me, and this is the old-time jack, not these crank jacks you've got now. This is the old-time jack that if you don't push it all the way down, it's going to fly up and hit you in the face.
Oh, yes.
I mean, old-time jack.
Yeah.
So he's teaching me on this. So we changed the tire twice, right, to make sure I knew how to do it. The next morning, my dad had gone off to work. I got up, and wouldn't you know, the left rear tire on my mom's car was flat.
You think he did it on purpose?
I think he did it on purpose.
Really?
I never asked him, but I had to go out there and change it.
How funny.
By myself. So that's how he taught you.
Did he bring it up, though, later?
That I don't remember. That I don't remember. But that's all good stuff. And thinking about my dad, I wrote this down a couple of years ago, just some thoughts. Because I've gotten into this writing thing, I suppose.
Well, you know.
I've
heard there's money in it.
Not for me.
Oh, okay.
So, my dad lived with us before he passed. He died on September 3rd, 2001, so a week and a day before the 9/11 attacks. And we really think it was probably a blessing that he went before that, because if he had seen those towers come down, that probably would have killed him, you know. But he lived with us for a while before he died. And my daughter Jessica, our daughter Jessica, took a photo of his hands. They were kind of folded, and it's a black and white print that we've got that maybe we'll post here with the video podcast. And I've looked at that picture, I don't know how many times, and I started thinking about what my dad's hands did during his time on Earth. And so I wrote some thoughts. They swung a baseball bat, a golf club, and a hammer. They banged out songs on the piano, though he couldn't read a note. They brought on some tears, and they wiped others away. They picked up his first cigarette, and they put his last one down. They performed magic tricks, and they rarely lost a game of checkers. They held guns and baby bottles and the Bible. They repaired pretty much everything. They were often cut or bruised. They were decorated by his granddaughters. He would let them do his fingernails and all that stuff, right? They raised 3 boys. They displayed his wedding ring for almost 60 years, and so much more. And that's we said when we began this. I hope that your memories of your dads are like ours. And I always say, whenever I post about my dad on social media, I always take the quote from the Dan Fogelberg song, Leader of the Band, which is a song about his dad. My life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man.
You know, and what's cool, you mentioned something in there. So, you know, thankfully my parents are Christians too, and my dad now has macular degeneration. And it's bad enough where it's even if he's looking at you, it's kind of having to turn his head a little and stuff like that. I don't know how many times in his life he's read through the Bible. And far more than probably I have, and I've read through it, but I mean, it sometimes be 2 or 3 times a year because he's also a speed reader. And even now that it's hard for him to read it, what I'll see is he's got the largest print Bible you can see. He's got one of these like jeweler magnifying glasses looking through another one, through a little bubble thing that we got him, and he will painfully read through that. And I'm like, you know, it's remained a consistent for him, even though it's very hard for him to see. You know, I'll share one last story that really I think made a lasting impression. So, you know, I mentioned my dad used to work for Western Electric, and you had to join the union. It was a different kind of union, but you had to join it. And so he's like, okay, fine. And occasionally they'd go on strike, and I'd say, what are you striking for? I don't know, but I got to. You know, it was one of those things where he'd rather be working.
Right.
And I remember this one time the strike had gone on for quite a while, and, you know, he's not getting paid, and he wasn't making much. And even though it was the 3 of us, he was the only one earning money. And I remember one day he got a job washing windows at Burger King. And it just tore me up because I was like, Dad, you don't need to be washing windows. You can do better than that. And I remember him saying, honey, we need money. And to him, it just didn't matter.
Right.
It wasn't a pride thing. It was work. And I thought, wow. And that's always...
He did what, again, the generation, they did what it took.
They did what it took. And that's always stuck with me. And I've even told my kids that if you're a greeter at Walmart, be the best greeter. Whatever you do in life, just try to be the best at it and make it something you love and your passion. And don't chase the money and stuff like that. But that's always stuck with me.
Absolutely.
That always stuck with me.
Good stuff.
Listen, here's our question for you. What's your memory of your dad? Actually, we would like, if you want to share any story about your dad, feel free to fill the comments up. And wherever you're watching this, we want to hear about your dad. We want to hear about the memories and things like that. And what are those really special things you remember about your dad? And hey, since Father's Day is coming up, happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to you.
And thank you so much for watching this. I'm Kevin.
I'm Bill.
And if you're a dad out there or a dad-to-be, happy Father's Day.
Yep.
This has been Two Guys Talking About with Kevin Kolbe and Bill Jordan. If you have an idea or comment or you're interested in sponsoring the show, connect and find out more at twoguystalkingabout.com. Two Guys Talking About is produced by Kolbe Creative Media.